Hello to you all. This is an introduction of African economy. The continent of Africa is blessed and full of natural resources, as from the north to the south and the east to the west. For mineral resources in one hand, there are diamonds, gold, iron ore, bauxite, aluminium, uranium, phosphate, and many others. On the other hand, there are varieties of agricultural produce and fertile soil. As for tourism, it is full of wildlife, sea creatures, beautiful landscape, woodland, deep forests, waterfalls, lakes, running water from hills to the valleys, the wonderful sea view, the cloud, the snow, the rainbow reflecting on the mountain from end to end, the inactive volcanic mountains, the sand dune, the desert, and the semi-arid areas. You may find all these natural resources in the continent of one race Africa. But yet, the Africans are dying of hunger, drought, malnutrition, immigrating to other continents for survival. If the question is to be answered, who are responsible for the impoverishment of African economy? Let us look into the economy of each one of the countries in Africa. Then you may give your opinion if wish. The world is part of Africa, and Africa is part of the world we live in. Do not destroy the wonders and beauties of our only beloved earth. Thank you so much.
The economy of Swaziland. Swaziland's economy is diversified, with agriculture, forestry, and mining accounting for about 13% of GDP. Manufacturing, textiles, and sugar-related processing representing 37% of GDP. And services, with government services in the lead, constituting 50% of GDP. Title deed lands where the bulk of high-value crops are growing, sugar, forestry, and citrus, are characterized by high level of investment and irrigation, and high productivity. About 75% of the population is employed in subsistence agriculture. In contrast with the commercial farms, Swazi Nation Land suffers from low productivity and investment. This dual nature of the Swazi economy, with high productivity in textile manufacturing and in the industrialized agriculture on the one hand, and declining productivity subsistence agriculture on the other, may well explain the country's overall low growth, high inequality, and unemployment. Economic growth in Swaziland has lagged behind that of its neighbors. Low agricultural productivity, repeated droughts, and an overly large and inefficient government sector are likely contributing factors. Swaziland's public finances deteriorated in the late 1990s, following sizable surpluses a decade earlier. A combination of declining revenues and increased spending led to significant budget deficits. The considerable spending did not lead to more growth and did not benefit the poor. Much of the increased spending has gone to current expenditures related to wages, transfers, and subsidies. On the positive side, the external debt burden has declined markedly over the last 20 years, and domestic debt is almost negligible. External debt as a percent of GDP was less than 20% in 2006. The Swazi economy is very closely linked to the economy of South Africa, from which it receives over 90% of its imports and which it sends about 70% of its exports. Swaziland's other key trading partners are the United States and the European Union, from whom the country has received trade preferences for apparel exports under the African Growth and Opportunity Act to the US and for sugar to the European Union. Under these agreements, both apparel and sugar exports did well, with rapid growth and a strong inflow of foreign direct investment. Textile exports grew by over 200% between 2000 and 2005, and sugar export increasing by more than 50% over the same period. The continued vibrancy of the export sector is threatened by the removal of trade preferences for textiles, the accession to similar preferences for East Asian countries, and the phasing out of preferential prices for sugar to the European Union market. Swaziland will thus have to face the challenge of remaining competitive in a changing global environment. A crucial factor in addressing this challenge is the investment climate. The recently concluded investment climate assessment provides some positive findings in this regard, namely that Swaziland farms are among the most productive in sub-Saharan Africa, although they are less productive than farms in the most productive middle-income countries in other regions. They compare more favorably with farms from lower middle-income countries, but are hampered by inadequate governance arrangements and infrastructure. Swaziland's currency is pegged to the South African rand. Incorporating Swaziland's monetary policy to South Africa, customs duties from the Southern African Customs Union, which may equal as much as 70% of government revenue this year, and worker remittances from South Africa substantially supplement domestically earned income. Swaziland is not poor enough to merit an IMF program. However, the country is struggling to reduce the size of the civil service and control costs at public enterprises. The government is trying to improve the atmosphere for foreign direct investment.